Hi, I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you're listening to Wild Voice, the podcast where I take this voice of mine and share my wild journey with you. Being widowed at 34 with a 15-month-old, most would see as life ending, and instead, I alchemized it and put life back together. Through my own healing, I realized who I am and what I'm here to do. I'm an intuitive energy healer and spiritual teacher, and sharing how I view the world is how I help you upgrade your life and alchemize your journey into magic. Today's episode is an interview I did with Jackson Hightower. He guides men to become skilled lovers and improve their masculine health through sexual mastery, perspective shifts, inner work, and overall health. He shares lots of tips with his female audience too, and has created his own natural supplement line called Natural Jackson. It helps support male vitality and sexual health. I think it's pretty apparent that he really treats this process and how he supports others as a full picture event. Not just tackling one thing, but building a strong foundation and adding pieces to the puzzle along the way. So everyone is a happier, stronger, healthier, more fulfilled version of themselves. Although I'm not a man, I find his tips and content so worthwhile, and our conversation today confirmed that even more. Jackson was so fun to talk to, not only for his outlook on life, but he is easy to connect with. He just gets it. So I'm super excited to share our chat today, ranging from the porndemic, as he calls it, differences between male and female orgasms, how he helps men shift perspectives, be patient, attentive lovers, and so much more. He also gave me a little tip on how us parents can help guide the young men we are raising as they grow up to have a healthy understanding of their own bodies, therefore bringing that magic into their future relationships and how they show up in the world. Healed people heal people. Not that any of us are ever done doing that, but this is a great example of it in my opinion. Okay, did I build it up enough? No pun intended. All right, Soul Fam, enjoy. What are you eating?
Okay. Oh, you don't want to know.
Oh no, why? Is it good or bad?
I'm eating mackerel and mayonnaise and potato chips.
Oh my gosh. That
I didn't
sounds...
work. I worked out earlier this morning. 18 grams of protein and 3 little mackerels. That's pretty good.
Really? My son loves seafood. I can't stand it. I've tried because I know it can be so good for you. So I'll make it for him. I'll have him eat it.
I mean, good luck with that mackerel. I don't know, how old is your kid?
He's 7, but he loves
he's
seafood.
mackerel at 7?
Yeah, he loves tuna. Like, he doesn't even want me to put anything in it. Like, so I don't know how fishy mackerel is or not, but
Fishier than tuna, but you could, if he eats tuna fish, like,
yeah,
it's the same thing.
really?
Yeah, it like has the same. You just mash it up, put the mayonnaise in. I've had a crazy morning.
Have
Not
you?
gonna lie. I was driving in my car this weekend, 50 miles an hour on a road up in Colorado, and the car just completely stopped working.
Like, just stopped
Everything
while you were
stopped.
driving?
Battery, electric, like power steering, like I could barely move. It was really, really gnarly, and so I've been trying to like get it fixed and all that stuff. But we're good.
What happens when that all of a sudden happens? That seems like it would be very intense.
Very weird.
Yeah.
Very weird. And also really scary.
Well, I'm glad.
I was fine, but I'm like dealing with
all
like
the
toe.
repercussions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're in Aspen. Do you live there? I thought for some reason you live in Miami.
I do. I have a place in Miami and I have a place in Aspen. So I usually spend the summer here and then I spend the winter, the rest of the year in Miami.
Nice. Oh my gosh. You're like a senior citizen. That's like what they do. They have somewhere they go in the summer and the winter.
I know. Like, okay, here we go. Wintertime. But it's fun. It's nice here. Where do you live?
I live in Oregon on the coast. So like by the beach.
Like Manzanita?
No, some of the coast. I live in Pacific City, which is a little more south.
Yeah, I went to Manzanita once. Great.
You did? What were you doing there? What took you to Manzanita?
I don't even know. I think maybe I was with an ex-girlfriend and I was up in Portland and we were like, let's go check out the beaches. And
yeah,
I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing coastline.
It is.
So raw and like rugged.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. I mean, I understand like maybe it's like challenging it's cold obviously and like the water's not that warm, but
right. Yeah. If you're getting in the water here, you're wearing a thick wetsuit but the town that we're in, it has a really good sandbar, so it's like a surf community.
Okay.
But you have to be a diehard to want to, put on a hooded wetsuit every time you get in the water. So
for sure.
But it's a fun community. Sometimes the Oregon coast communities are a little more elderly, and this one's a little more youthful.
So it's been nice.
Good.
But I'm excited to chat with you today, and I just want to dive into it. I figure we'll just jump right
Yeah.
in and just cover what we cover. So
That's cool.
this podcast started because I think we all kind of go through stuff, and it kind of leads us to where we're meant to go. And sometimes it's really gnarly and intense, and the moment it feels like, what the hell is happening, and am I prepared for this? And then you find very quickly that you are, and that it pretty much guides us to some of the most amazing things. And I don't know too much about your story, but I know that there obviously is something that led you to this sexual mastery and guiding men, you know, to improve their overall health as well as their sexual health and understanding of how they operate and how women operate. So what was your thing that kind of put you on this journey that maybe was not so great in the moment, but now has been kind of a gift?
Yeah. I had some very real direct feedback when I was a younger guy, like in my college years, about my capacity and my skills in the bedroom. And an older woman, an older girl, and she was a senior and I was a freshman, and it sort of rocked me. I was like, wow, I'm usually really good at things. I've been an athlete my whole life. I'm good at school. I was doing all this stuff and I was training really hard at everything I had done. And I'd always worked with coaches. And this particular area was, like, we're never taught any of these skills. Sex ed in school is very lackluster. Let's just say that as the word. And I realized in that moment, and I'm like, I'm kind of a precocious kid. I was always like studying and wanting to get better at different things. And so when you got that feedback, I actually took the note. And, it was like, hey, like, you don't really have any idea what you're doing here. Like, you got to go slower. You got to do this. You got to do that. And then having grown up with this culture of like watching, porn as our like, oh, how do we learn these things, and what are the moves that we should be doing, and the speed and the cadence and whatnot. We think that that's real, and it's just so not real, right? They're movies, and they're meant to create these environments where like we have to do certain things and act certain ways, and the reality is like that's not how lovemaking should go. So I took that note, and I said to myself, I was like, I don't really want that to happen again. Like, that doesn't feel good. And so like I'm grateful for the feedback, right? Because feedback is a gift. And I started, maybe not necessarily in my college years, but as I got out of my college years, someone ended up giving me a book called The Way of the Superior Man by David Data, and that was one of the seminal books for me in terms of my own personal growth journey of understanding like, oh, there are people who do this professionally. There are people who study male-female relationship dynamics. There are people who have a perspective and an opinion and a path to guide you along. So I at that point I went deep on it, and I was always doing it on the side of my professional life. I was doing a variety of different things, running a variety of different companies, but on my personal time I was always really interested in this. So he was the first sort of person that I read, and then I read all of his stuff, listened to all of his audio notes and lessons, and then went down the path of working with other different masters and practitioners of different modalities and breath work and sexual qigong and sexual kung fu and things like that to enhance my skill set, so that that conversation never happened again. But during the course of me learning about how to connect with my own sexual energy first, I think that's the thing that guys miss. We focus on, oh, well, what are the things I should be doing in the bedroom? I'm like, how about you don't start there? We're in this culture of like, oh, I want to learn all the things, and it's like, yo, you need to get connected to yourself, right? If you're watching porn and masturbating three or four times a day, which a tremendous amount of men do, like tremendous amounts, of all ages, 15 to 65 or 70, because they're addicted, you have to sort of realize that that's not the healthiest connection with your own sexual energy, and you sort of get connected. So getting that stuff off your phone and off your computer, and then working, more inwards. And then as you build up that inward healthy connection, then you can have a really beautiful connection with the partner. I think it's very, very hard. I don't know how you feel about this, but I find it very difficult to be a man with an unhealthy connection to your own sexual energy and trying to have a positive, healthy, intimate relationship with your partner. I think it's very difficult to do. So that's where I always focus on with guys. It's like, let's start with number one. Start with you, and then you can obviously branch out, from there. But that was it, and over time, you'd get better and better feedback. You're like, oh, okay, cool. I'm like incorporating this stuff, and this is working a lot better, and we're having much better experiences, and women are much more receptive to the experience, and so it was really about having a much more harmonious connection with female partners, girlfriends, etc. As I was in my 20s and into 30s, etc.
Well, that is a very enlightened and conscious way at that age, I feel like, to even approach it that way. A lot of men would get feedback and possibly their ego will kick up, or they might put it back on to the female who gave the direction. And the fact that you had the wherewithal to kind of take it and use it obviously shows that this is obviously what you're meant to be doing, but is also something that I think more men can do, and even younger and younger. And that's what I'm so passionate about. Obviously, I'm raising a small human as a female, raising a small man that is going to grow up someday and be out in this world. And I find over the handful of things that you just mentioned, the porn conversation and the connection to self are two things that are just massively important, especially as a female. We intuitively, and especially if we're tapped in, can pick up on anything. The more we learn, we might know what we're picking up on, but sometimes we just pick up on stuff and we can't really put our finger on it, but we can sense it. Like we can feel when a man's like not grounded and he's not connected to himself. That will change our behavior and how we show up, that which then just continues this dance back and forth and isn't the best dynamic until someone does something about it. But with the porn conversation, that is something that I have found has been this Achilles heel in past relationships and relationships that I've come in contact with, because it's so normalized. It's so like if a female says something, it's like, well, you're being jealous or you're being ridiculous or all guys do this. That's a lot of what I hear. Like all guys do this. Like this is pretty normal. You watch TV, it's brought up comically. That doesn't work for me. Like that is something that is extremely a huge red flag for a handful of reasons, because I feel like it's the integrity behind it. It's the energy. And I want to dive into that more because as I've leaned into energy work and just being so sensitive to that, to me, as we think cheating, I remember when people would say, like, if someone's watching porn, they consider it cheating. And I used to not really understand that. And then when I started to understand energy more, I'm like, it almost bothers me more because we can like transport ourselves places energetically. What our mind is doing is almost where we take our body. It's not really the other way around. That's why we can be somewhere physically and be extremely not present. Like it's really where our mind is where we are. And so with porn and that conversation, how do you even, when someone is so ingrained, let's say they've been a man or a young man at 12 or 13 with their buddies, it becomes this thing to where now as they get older, it's what they use to kind of like self-soothe, or it's what they use to kind of, I've heard guys that do it like 6 times a day. And I'm like, where is your sexual energy going? And what does your relationship look like to sex? Like, is your girlfriend or wife fulfilled? Because it seems like a lot of your energy is going in a completely different direction. And you're actually considering and thinking about having sex with other women as this is happening. So it's a huge topic. I know there's so much we could touch on, but what do you find is like someone who's starting that journey to be like, oh, maybe this is something I want to change? And the other part, how does a female even broach this topic without getting, the third degree that she's all the things and doesn't get how guys are?
Yeah. So the first question, so thank you for sharing. And I totally agree with you. And it is an epidemic. I mean, it's like a porndemic almost. And it was really exacerbated with COVID for sure.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Because people just felt inside, not being able to connect with other people, etc. I have a very firm no porn policy. Everyone I work with, I'm just like, there is no real positive that it's going to have for a man. It teaches them all the wrong moves. It creates this false sense of intimacy that they understand what a woman wants, and it's just completely the opposite. And it messes up their dopamine reward response pathway. That's the biggest issue that men have no real concept of. Self-soothing, right? When you're hungover, when you're tired, when you're feeling bad about yourself, right? People go eat, people go shop, people do a variety of things. Yeah. And that because it's dopamine is saying, what's the quickest way that I can actually get pleasure? Because that's what dopamine does, right? And so if you've been habituating as a man to watching porn regularly, your dopamine goes up when you're approaching climax, and then it obviously, as soon as you ejaculate, like it drops. But the dopamine pathway is being trained, so to speak, which leads to porn-induced erectile dysfunction, because when you're with a real human, you don't have that same level of intensity, because porn is really intense. It's very, very visceral. It's very fast. It's very hardcore. So I tell guys, I'm like, look, you have to find a way within yourself to stop watching porn. There's programs, there's different things that you can do, there's books you can read, but at the end of the day, like, you either can do it or you can't. You can set up things on your computer, on your phone, like, don't look at this, don't look at that, and it actually blocks you. It's about self-discipline, right? And again, it is addictive. You know what I mean? It's an addictive thing. It's worse than a lot of other drug addictions because it's silent and it's hidden. You can't see it outwardly. The only way that you can see a porn addiction really as a woman is if by the way the man makes love to you, because usually you'll know. Right. I don't know if you agree or
I do.
A lot of women tend to agree with that, right?
Or lack thereof. I find when the consistency or the sexual connection starts to lack and you stop having sex and you're like, something, as a woman, you go, something's up and I have about 50 things and that's one of them at the top.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I've talked to many women who they were in great relationships and then something changed or shifted and then the sex got less and less, or more and more sporadic, I should say, and then they find out after the fact that, this person is addicted to porn and they're basically putting all of their energy, all of their sexual energy, all of their intimate energy into this non-real scenario that is completely like, effing them up. And it's sad. And, because it's so pervasive in our culture, it's a $120 billion industry. Like, I think what third of every download on the internet is porn. They know what they're doing and, they're doing it well. And it's really unfortunate. The second part of your question, the thing I've learned is that like communication is the most important thing in the world. And communicating as a woman to a man, you have to remember, men are very sensitive, much more sensitive than they appear outwardly, especially as it relates to their sexual energy and their sexual health and their sexual performance. Anything that's related to their penis, they are very sensitive. And that's okay. I am too. You know what I mean? And like that's just who we are. As men, we take a lot of pride and worth and value as it relates to our sexual, capacities, skills, etc. The way to communicate best with a man generally is to embrace the communication as like a team, as in like as a together thing. Right. Anytime, a lot of, females come and say, oh, it's like, oh, how do I want to share this content with my partner and tell him to do this stuff. I'm like, don't do that. Don't tell him to do this stuff. Yeah. Right. Because then he's going to look at me and say, well, screw that. Like that, and then the ego and the defensiveness kicks in. It's just the wrong way to do it. I'm here to share with men and with women and create an environment where there's new skills to be learned and new, avenues to explore. It's about having compassion for men, right? Creating a space where men can communicate with me very vulnerably and share in a way where it's like, yo, I got you, right? As a woman, finding ways to communicate and share with a man so that he feels the most cared for, feels incredibly compassionate. So it's not like a me versus you thing. It's a together thing. It's an us thing, right? I want to explore this with you. I want to explore that with you. If a man has an issue and, a woman is trying to address that, like there does need to be some sort of direct communication, which is like, yeah, a lot of guys do this, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing, right? Just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean that it's a way that it's going to help you and I get closer together as partner, right? I want to get closer to you. I want to feel more comfortable with you in the bedroom. I want to have more deeper, intimate experiences with you. I want your presence, right? I want you to be there with me when we are together. And, sharing facts about what porn actually does. Men are linear, fact-based creatures, right? And so a lot of times what happens is they don't know the harm and the ill that porn causes. And until they're presented with it, over and over and over again by either looking at people on the internet or influencers or studies, or you have to remember what's going to, men are analytical, a lot of them, right? And so it's like, what's going to get the attention of this guy? Is it someone who he respects out in the world, athletes, entertainers, etc.? Is he more of a science kind of, analytical based, guy where he wants to read? He wants to understand the study from PubMed or from NCBI, which talks about dopamine and porn addiction and things like that. So you have to sort of work backwards and understand who is your man and like how does he best receive information, and then slowly and carefully and compassionately share in a way that's going to get his attention. To know that like all you want is to like be more intimate and have better experiences and be more connected with him as a team, as opposed to like creating this separation, of like, and you can not like the fact that he does it, but you not liking the fact that he does it isn't going to help you get your result that you want. You have to be really smart about the way that you're communicating and sharing, in those scenarios with men. So I don't have like a crystal ball about what exactly to say, but you have to know the contextually what's going to work for your guy and what's not going to work for him.
That's great. Because with females, we actually don't need like do this, this, and this. We just need like a couple bits of information, and then we kind of like dive into it and use it in our own way. So I think that's super helpful because it's a tough conversation to have. You're sensitive to it. As a female, you're sensitive to it because it's already uncomfortable to know that this is happening, and it feels personal, even though it's not necessarily. And then you also know it's sensitive to your partner. And so there's just a lot of sensitivity going on in a conversation that needs to be had, but a lot of people don't. And I think what happens too is a lot of females will say, they'll kind of act like they don't care about sex in a relationship as they've been in one for, let's say they're married for multiple years or in a partnership for a while. And I've heard women say, and they'll be like, oh, she's just going to do what he wants. He at least won't bother me. And when I hear that, I'm like, that's so unfortunate, because I think part of a partnership, the sexual intimacy and that connection is a huge, huge part of it, in my opinion. And it makes you what's different between you and a best friend and a roommate. And when females do that, I think there's a lot of that of, I'm not going to be able to change him. I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. I'm just going to accept it. And they also accept the behavior and the interaction in the bedroom, where it's like, it's quick, or it's this, and let's just get it over with and move on. Because if he's having sex with me, he won't be with anybody else. And I just find that it's such a disservice to what people can create in a relationship, in a partnership. And if we have ways to just understand it a little bit better and have these conversations, and they don't need to be these big, intense, blow up accusations, I just think little bits and pieces can start to shift, which makes a big difference.
Yeah.
I also find Instagram, I find that over time has also been like, I don't know what to call them, butt models. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Or
that
like
to
roll,
me,
right? Like
yes.
they're good at all the girls are doing it. It's like above their
Yes,
breath, it's like in their eyes, and it's like these POV shots, and the girls know what they're doing. I mean, they get it, you know.
exactly.
It's
And that's the hard part. And like, you see it, and then it's like a trap. And it's, yes, everyone has their own, like, a man can choose to engage in that or not. It just seems like it's something that now becomes another thing. Well, it's Instagram. It's not, I'm not watching porn. I'm on Instagram. And the things that I have come across and seen, I'm like, oh, we're practically there. Like, I think it's pretty dang close. And it's almost, to me, a little bit more intense, in my opinion, because it's normal. It's like a normal person going about their everyday life. It's almost like you know them. It's like someone has sent you
right.
a message and you're looking at it like it's for you personally. And that to me has just, there's just an integrity piece to it, and just like an ick factor for me personally, just because I've experienced certain things, and so I just know at this point in the stage of my life, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I just know that doesn't work for me. If someone's very, it just shows where your attention is going.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's an interesting, scale of static image, right? Has the lowest capacity to change the neuroplasticity of your brain, right? So looking at like a Playboy, for instance, right? It's an image, it's a photo on a paper. You have to use your imagination and use your brain to create whatever other image you want to have with that, whatever fantasy that you have. The more dynamic and the more intense the video that you watch, the higher degree that the neuroplasticity in the brain changes. So going from static image to, a TikTok or an Instagram, which obviously isn't porn, right? It's just a human,
Right.
but you can visualize whatever that they're showing you, bikinis, whatever. But then when you get into porn, like that's the stuff where, so I would say like, I would rather have a guy watching Instagram and TikTok than watching hardcore porn, right? As the level
Mm-hmm.
of like severity and like the way that it's actually going to affect their body. Obviously, best case is like use your imagination or use a picture. But again, like, we're human. Like, we like to look at images. This is the way that we're made. But that is the scale. So I say like, if you to wean off, right? Like, get off of the porn. If you need to look at videos on TikTok and Instagram as a way to wean off slowly, if you can't just quit cold turkey, do that, and then slowly kind of go, down and down and down from there. And that's something that I share with a lot of men, of like a way to wean off of the intenseness of watching porn.
Is that what, did you have where you had to kind of take yourself down this path? Or has it been something you've kind of known, since it sounds like you've been so aware for so long, that this was something that you kind of like see those things and you're like, like, what does it do to you? Can you see that? Are you kind of like, okay, this is next? Or do you have to be like, I just need to stay away from that stuff because it's just can draw you in? Not even you
Yeah.
personally, but just in general as a human.
I haven't watched porn since August 8th, 2014.
Oh, wow.
So it's coming up on 10 years actually, in about 16 days.
Wow.
I happened to just quit cold turkey,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, this is not good for me. This is not helping me in any capacity. It's taking up my energy. It's taking up my time. It's taking up my life force in a way that isn't helpful to my, like, where I want to be in my life. And so I just happened to do it. Not everyone can do that, right? It's like some people can quit cigarettes cold turkey. Some people can quit alcohol cold turkey. Everyone has like a different operating system. I encourage men to quit and to do everything in their power to limit their ability to look at those sites, whatever it may be. Focusing on different activities, and go jump in the shower, jump in a cold plunge, go do 10 push-ups, anything that gets you out of that realm of like, I need to go do this. Because again, the dopamine is triggered. So they're going to follow that. Oh, what's the quickest path to pleasure? If it still remains, porn, you're going to go for it. But yeah, I mean, I don't, I have a zero tolerance policy. I talk to a lot of people and they're like, oh, Jackson, like, I don't agree with you. And like, I watch porn every now and then. I'm like, that's cool. I'm not really talking to that person. I'm talking
Yeah.
to the guys that are watching 3 or 4 times a day, that this is their only connection with like sexual intimacy, which isn't really real. And, there's a problem. There's a problem there. And they're not going out in the world and trying to find a partner. They're not going out on dates. They're not, they're stuck behind the computer screen or they're in their dating apps and they're just, this very passive, human experience is about chemistry. It's about energy. It's about connection. It's one of the reasons why I don't use dating apps. It's not how
Those are the worst.
I need that. I need like, how are we connecting? I want to feel that person, right, in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have a zero tolerance policy and I just tell people like, look, you can do it. I just don't think it's going to really benefit you at all, and I think let's elevate above it. And again, it takes someone who's like really wants that,
Yeah. So do you think that is part of the sexual dysfunction? I know you've talked about that quite a bit. And sexual dysfunction can be someone who, I guess I'll let you tell me, what are the differences between sexual dysfunction? Because I know there's not just, I think a lot of people think of one type, and I'd love to get your opinion and your mastery on that.
Yeah, there's a couple. We are in a situation right now where something called porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which is called PIED, is now taking over. Porn-induced erectile dysfunction is for men who are usually younger, in their 20s and 30s, who typically don't have the physiological erectile dysfunction issues that men in their 50s and 60s might have, but they have the psychological porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which means that their dopamine has been so skewed and so habituated to looking at porn that they are incapable of getting an erection with a real person because it's never as intense and the dopamine just doesn't go up as high, and so they're like and that's a huge issue. I would say 25 to 30% of the DMs that I get on a weekly basis are from men who are in their 20s and early 30s who have PIED. So that is a big area of sexual dysfunction now. The second is, performance anxiety. You watch LeBron James play basketball and then you go out and play basketball and you think that you're going to be like LeBron James. Well, guess what? Like, it's not really how it works. So these guys are picked because they're well hung, because they can last a long time, and who knows what other drugs or things that they may be taking that you don't necessarily know about. They're in a movie, which means that it's shot and cut in the best way possible. It's not like an actual lovemaking scenario. So when a guy watches that and then he looks down and he's like, okay, well, I'm not quite that big. Like, am I enough? Is she going to enjoy this experience? And then, I can't do that move, or I can't go that long, or this, and you build up this false sense of what it actually means to be, skillful in bed, and it has nothing to do with any of the things that you're watching on porn. So a lot of guys develop performance anxiety, which creates, and anytime you have anxiety or cortisol or stress in your system, it could be from a variety of things. You don't need to be running away from, a tiger like a Neanderthal. A bit of cortisol or stress or anxiety ultimately causes you to lose an erection. So, we want to be in the most relaxed, chill kind of like, that allows the blood flow to actually flow. It doesn't constrict the vessels. It allows the blood vessels to expand, which means that you're going to have a better chance of getting a better erection. So that's the second one. And performance anxiety leads to ED, and it can also lead to premature, release. And then that's
really? I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, because what happens is like you get super excited, and then you go too quick, right? Or you habituate yourself by watching porn by going really quickly and doing it 4 times a day. It's like, well, you're not obviously going for an hour each time. If it's 4 times a day, you're probably doing it for like a couple minutes, right? And just to get to the point where you're like, or like a quickie. And so again, it's muscle memory, right? Like how you practice is like how you play. So if you're consistently watching porn and going very quickly with yourself, well, how long you think you're going to be able to last a really long time with a woman? So those are the areas of sexual dysfunction. And I would say that 75% of men experience one of those things at any given time.
Yeah.
And that's it's based on studies, but studies are so underreported. So it's mostly based on my anecdotal and looking at my data and numbers and figures of people that are communicating with me. But yeah, like there's always something usually going on with the guy. And you also get into a lot of sort of a different topic, but like the ED and with the young men and the performance anxiety and the sexual dysfunction, then you get this wave of pharmaceutical companies marketing their drugs to young men, right? Hims and Roman and all these companies that are selling generic Viagra and Cialis. That's all they sell. right? And they're doing a phenomenal job of marketing them as, oh, it's just a Hims. Well, it's actually Viagra, generic version of Viagra. And, if you develop a dependency to that as a man, right? So you start taking that to get an erection. Well, your erections are going to be, if it works, it's going to be very strong and very hard. And you're going to be able to perform in a way that's like not actually you. It's like taking steroids.
Right.
And then you start getting habituated to that. And so, well, what happens when you don't have it? Your girl's going to be like, what's going on? And then you're going to need it again. So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a vicious cycle of ED, taking pharmaceutical drugs for them, and then performing, and then needing to have that to perform, and it's pretty crazy.
Big mess. It's a big
Yeah,
mess.
it's a huge mess, and like no one's really
Yeah.
talking about it, obviously, because pharmaceutical companies just want to make money.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's we're at a very interesting time for men right now. We're in a very interesting time for men, with the porn addictions, with pharmaceuticals, with the dating apps, with the feminist Me Too movement. Men feeling like that they can't actually be themselves in public and go up and talk to women, because there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now for men, and it's challenging because there aren't a tremendous amount of role models they've had, or their parents or their fathers from that generation. Their generation is just very different. They're programmed differently. They have different people that they learn from, and so we're in this phase of like, men, we need to actually elevate and explore more positive role models to get into this healthy form of masculine.
Yeah.
And honor our masculinity, right? Like honor our testosterone. Testosterone is really good for you. It's really important. It's what makes men men. It keeps us healthy. It keeps our immune system strong. It gives us will. It gives us drive, but also stepping up in a way to elevate into this, masculine space.
Mm-hmm. And it's that like mind-body connection, right? Like you said, you can't just fix one thing over here and not tackle what's going on underlying. Yeah. And on the topic of what would someone do, and I think if I am remembering correctly, you have supplements, and I know you work in a full circle with men, but you have things that they can take that are natural and can support their system and balance in a healthy way. Is that right?
Yeah. So my entire business, obviously Natural Jackson is the name. It is non-pharmaceutical programs and solutions for men to elevate their libido, their circulation, their arousal, work on their inner organs function. And so there are a blend of Chinese herbal formulas, and some are focused on libido and arousal, some are focused on erectile dysfunction, some are focused on lasting longer. And, I always say, like, look, like the supplements are important, right? They're like food. Herbs are very powerful. Chinese medicine has been around for 3,000 years. And so the herbs are powerful, but you have to take them regularly and consistently, just like you eat food. And the effects of these, it's basically, it builds the foundation, and it increases the foundational level of your sexual capacity. That's what it does. And it takes, a number of months to get there. So I have subscription programs for men, and I'm like, look, like if you want to take something for 2 weeks, and if it doesn't work for you, don't take this, right? Like I want you taking this for a long period of time. It has nothing to do with my interest in making more money. It has everything to do with my interest in actually giving you something that's going to help you. People look at supplements and pharmaceuticals, right? It's like, oh, there's a quick path. I'll take a pill. I'll take a blue chew. I'll take a Viagra. But what is it doing in the long term, right? It may have an immediate effect for you, and sure, it might feel great, but like, what are you training your body to need? You know what I mean? And the shortcut that we often look at for pharmaceuticals, which are more band-aid solutions, it ends up being usually like a long cut, I call it, right? It's a long way around, because you get addicted to it, you have to come off of it, and like, well, then what are you going to do? So I say, look at herbs and supplements as like nature's way of getting you to the place where you naturally should be, right? And so that's what we focus on with our supplement programs with Natural Jackson. And I always say, like, look, supplements are great, but like the education and the training is the next, the other part of it, right? Which they go hand in hand.
Yeah, piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, exactly.
So, similar topic, obviously all of this is all connected, but I know you've talked about it a lot, but I think it's worth sharing the foreplay conversation. I think a lot of that gets missed or over the top of the head of, no pun intended, of just how long it takes a female to just kind of tap in and drop into being in the moment and being able to, and once we get there, we can, like, it's almost like we're on an even playing field, but we just have to get there with you. So what is something that you share with men and even women, or what
Mhm.
could you share with people about foreplay in itself, and someone who might feel like a female, we tend to feel a little self-conscious about it because we know there's a lot of forward motion, and with a lot of men, it's not necessarily this quickness, but it's this like there's an end goal. You know that with most men that you're with. I don't know any man that I've been with that would say, you know what, we're just gonna get me to the point that I'm almost there, and then I'm just gonna leave. We're done. Then I'm walking away. And a lot of females, that happens. Like we get so close, and then we have to go on with our day. Like it's just like once they're done, it's done. And so what? As a female being, we tend to know that about ourselves, but it's kind of like, I don't want to have to say, you got to put in 20 minutes. And are they going to be like, I got 15. So that means either I go or we just don't do this and I just go handle this myself, you know? So what would you, or how do you kind of bridge that conversation and give information so everyone can be happier?
First, there's different types of sex, right? There's the quickie, right? And that's great when women are ovulating or close to ovulating, and there's like this moment, and you don't need to make love for an hour, right? And both of you kind of know that that's going to happen. And generally speaking, maybe the man gets out first. I always tell guys, I'm like, look, you're gonna get off at some point. Like it's like bound to happen. It's very easy, right? So what if you stopped focusing on yourself for the first part, and then focus your energy on, and this is the other type of sex, right? Focus your energy on her. With women, I mean, foreplay starts well before the actual any clothes come off.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the way that they're communicating. It's the way that you're texting. It's all of the other stuff. It's the ambiance that you're setting. It's the music that's on. It's the sounds. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of things that most men, because we're kind of like goal oriented. This is what I want to do. I want to, get in there. I want to get out, etc. There needs to be a shift within men, which is like, okay, I know that this is going to happen for me, so I'm going to delay it until the end, right? And build up my own energy and learn how to like deal with that and learn how to like control that, and then focus on exploring and like really enjoying the pleasure, because pleasure in sex, it's not necessarily always about yourself, right? Same with relationships. You do a lot of things for your partner that you may not do if you didn't have one. And so the foreplay conversation is basically like, hey, it takes 20 to 40 minutes, depending on where the woman's at in her cycle and how she's feeling, etc., to get into a place where she's actually going to be able to have an orgasm. So I share with men, like, take your time. You're going to get yours. Don't worry. If you focus on her first, you're definitely going to get yours for sure afterwards, right? And even,
sure.
and you know what I mean? It's just like, because if a woman is experiencing that type of pleasure, there's really no way that she's not going to be very, very, very interested in the finality of whatever the man is focused on. And so I'm trying to teach men about a completely different way of being sexually intimate, right? Where I don't even ejaculate 50% of the time, because I don't really want to, right? I don't really need to. And my goal for the experience is have a beautiful experience of pleasure and connection. I've moved past the point where I don't need to ejaculate all that regularly. A lot of men aren't necessarily there yet, and that's okay. But I tell them, if you are able to spend a little bit more time at the beginning boiling this pot of water, right? Women are like fire and men, women are like water and men are like fire, right? So you have to spend time with the burner on, right? It doesn't just like start bubbling immediately. Focus a little bit more of your energy there. You'll have a much better experience overall. You will definitely get off at the end of the experience if that's what your goal is. Your partner is going to be much, I would say, like happier in general with the experience, less sexually frustrated, more orgasm equality. And that stuff is important to me because in my experience, a woman who is well loved, let's call it, like a woman who actually is, if a man knows how to skillfully make love to a woman, they're just happier in general, right? Like you have orgasmic energy flowing through your body, you're bright, you're glowing, you're shining, like you're generally happier and you have better experiences. And I think, and I can't speak for women, but in my personal experience, the women that I've been with, like they're just much more amenable and easier, and they're like, cool, like what can we do for you, like and it's just a better experience overall than consistently me getting what it is that I think that I want or need, and then leaving you out to dry, no pun intended. So it's a shift of mindset, and that's really what one of the major parts of my platform is all about, is like you have to think about it from a different perspective and take a different approach, and have a more harmonious and a sort of equanimous sexual experience. And yeah, and like learning the skills that it takes to get there, and creating a safe environment where a woman can actually unfold and trust and surrender to a man. So yeah.
It's really nice because I think sometimes we feel like there's no options. I don't know how men feel, but from what I've picked up on, it can feel like, well, this is just me. I don't know how to change this. And you open that up to being there's so many different ways to actually get through this. This all can be figured out. This all can be navigated, and you can feel better in the process. And women, the same thing. Like, you're giving options and ways and things to look at it differently. That just makes it better for everybody. Like, everyone's just happier.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
More orgasms, for women
yeah,
is gonna create a much more harmonious experience for the men. And they just need to sort of oh wait, got it. If I can do that, then it's like there's always like, it's not manipulation. It's just like, how do
yeah,
I want to create the best experience for me, right? Everyone is self-interested in the world. Like, we're
yeah,
humans. That's
right.
how we function. And so it's like, okay, like, I want to create a better relationship with my partner. I want my partner to have more joy and more pleasure. Like, that's probably going to affect me positively, And so, like, what can I do to do that? Because
Yeah,
as a man, I know that it's very easy for me to get off and have that moment. And some people are like, oh, I don't have time. It's like, well, that's fine. The moments that you don't have time, do whatever you got to do. Have the quickie. But then make time for maybe the longer sessions where, you can explore each other more. Start out with massage, really like explore your partner's body, and, try to love on them in a way that makes them feel really good in a genuine way.
that's well. I've also heard a lot of people say that, like, women are like multipliers. Like, you bring us something and we take it and we make it something different. And this would be a great example of that. You bring us this opportunity and then we magnify the situation and the experience. So I think that's a really cool way to look at it. And you're saying about how men and women, their orgasms are different. They do different things to the body and the chemistry and how we operate. And can you touch on that a little bit? Because I know also you've mentioned about life force energy and sexual energy. And for men, releasing that is very different than for females, and kind of how we operate in the world. So can you
Yeah,
touch on that?
sure. Life force energy, when it's released from a man, saps your power. It saps all of your energy. Hormones are flooded through your body, which make you satiated, content, happy, and have zero libido. The hormone is prolactin. It's the same hormone that a woman releases during breastfeeding to make the baby relax and feel satiated and take a nap. I call it like sleepy puppy. So there's this myth that, we want to ejaculate more, and as we get older, we want to, continue ejaculating, and the reality is, this in the studies that I've done and in my own personal experience, like, I just turned 40. I feel different when I ejaculate. I feel less connected. I feel less present. I'm kind of like a little bit tired, a little bit lethargic. When I was 18 years old, it was a little bit different. The refractory period is shorter. And so as men age, there's kind of like a sliding. There's like a scale. It's like, as you get older, you want to ejaculate less. You want to keep that energy in, right? Because it is a sign of your vitality, your inner vitality, and what you possess as a man. In Taoist philosophy, they call this like immortality. It's not actually living forever, but it's living with full vitality as long as you can, right? So that's what happens to men. Now with women, and again, I'm not capable of speaking for women directly, but what I would say is, I understand from my personal experience, but also from the texts and the teachers that I've worked with, when women are having more clitoral orgasms, which is much more closer to the penis, women's energy levels can sometimes go up, but they can sometimes also be depleted from more of a clitoral orgasm. It's my understanding that when women have more G-spot or A-spot or cervical or deeper orgasms within their body, that energy actually fuses them with life force. So they're not actually being depleted, by those types of orgasms, and they're actually being, the energy comes, through them more. So it's this funny thing where it's like, men, we want to come, but it takes away our power. And if you can learn how to do the opposite, you'll have more power, and you'll actually have better sexual experiences and longer sexual experiences, and give more time for your female partner to have orgasms, which then fill her with energy. So it's like a total flipping the script on our current, status quo of sexuality. You'd obviously, every woman is different, and every female body is different. And so those types of orgasms that they can have, they may not always, give them power. Some of them may also be draining, just because it is a a release. But that's my understanding, at least. And so as women, you want to have as many orgasms as possible, because that energy can flow through your entire body in a way that is very different from how it is as a man. Now, as a man, if you're able to take that energy and then cycle that energy, so I call it edging. It's like you get to the point of an 8 out of a 10 from ejaculation, and you take that energy and you cycle it through your system. You do this breathing routine and a couple other things. You can feel high and you feel present, and you're like, wow. Now you don't have that ejaculatory release, that moment of bliss, but you maintain your power, and you maintain your presence, and you maintain your connection, and you maintain your ability to have sex again relatively quickly if you needed to or wanted to. And that's a really powerful thing. And I've noticed that as I've gotten older and I've gotten better at this practice, that I show up in the world differently. I can't even remember the last time I ejaculated 3 times in a day. It's just like it's like a non-starter for me at this point, because I know I'm just gonna be sapped, and I'm running a business, I'm working out, I'm doing the physical things. I'm like, I don't have time to do that, but B, I know that it's going to take away what it is that I need in order to give me the life force that I need to flow through the world.
Wow, is that tantra? Is that, or tantra? Is that kind of what that ideology is?
A lot of people, so tantra is a philosophy of living that's based out of, it's an based out of Indian practices. Taoism is a philosophy of living based out of, China. Tantra really isn't, it gets kind of bastardized. It's not really about sex. It's about connection.
It isn't.
It's about like the unity of consciousness between me and spirit world. One of the factions of Tantra is that you can actually experience godlike states and unity consciousness with another person through sex. But people are like, oh my God, Tantra, it's all sex. It's really a very small part of it is about sex. You can do tantric practices, which is really about connection. It's about eye gazing. It's about chakra alignment. It's about breathing with each other in unison. It's always to connect with another person, to connect your consciousness at this 3D plane, and then connected to a higher power. So edging is more, they teach, semen retention and edging in, I would say, most of these cultures, in Indian culture and through Tantra and through Taoism. And each one has sort of different practices that they, actual like physical practices that you can do to maintain that, your seed. So Tantra gets used a bit incorrectly a lot of the time, which is okay.
Yeah, well, I think the practice, it seems like for someone who would be listening and, let's say, starting this journey of wanting more connection and kind of changing the aspects of how they operate, it seems like the ultimate goal would be to what you're explaining, kind of how you operate now. And that took some time, obviously, and takes a lot of mindfulness, and that's a big, huge passion of yours. So obviously it's very important to you. As far as like initiating sex, and do you have an opinion on who's the initiator, who's not? I know there's no set rules, but as far as masculine, feminine, and how it operates, because I've heard men like to be the initiator, and then there are times they do want to be seeked and feel desired as well. But then it's very different, right? A female, although we take time, sometimes men are in their masculine, they're working, they're focused, and to have someone kind of like peek around the corner and be like, hey, like, I was wondering if you had 20 minutes. So what is your feedback or opinion or advice for someone who would want to initiate as a female, and finding the right way to do that? And do men like that? Do they like being the normally being the ones to initiate, but every once in a while? Or is that completely backwards and they like being seeked out just as much as women do?
It's a great question. First of all, every man is different, and every man's day is different. Men also have hormone cycles throughout the day. At the beginning of the day, our testosterone is highest. And that's why morning sex can obviously be really fun and enjoyable. And then, around, it goes kind of like up, like 8, 9, 10, and it kind of like plateaus, and it goes down a little bit, and then it goes up again in the afternoon a little bit, and then it kind of like goes down. So the worst time to have sex as a man is actually in the afternoon and evening, which is when most people are free and available, which is kind of sucks. Afternoon.
And most women are checked out and like, okay, now I can focus. Like the kids are asleep. Like
exactly.
I'm here.
Yeah. And this concept of like afternoon delight. Well, that's based on, when we have sex in the afternoon, which can be really fun. People's schedules and whatnot, like very difficult, to organize that. In terms of, do men like being approached and like to have sex initiated on them? I think it really depends on the man, and it also depends on what he is doing during the day. if a man is in the zone and in his work mode and really focused, it's not really a great idea to try to interrupt him from that, because he needs to move out of this sort of linear, like, getting shit done mode into, okay, I can play and, have time, etc. That type of sex, if he does engage in that, would probably more be on the quicker side, because it's like, I got to get back to work. If you're a woman in a situation with a man where you're both working at home, or he works at home, or whatever it may be, you can find time where you can feel that he's out of his mode, engaging with like a back massage, like a head scratch, like rubbing his body, something like that, that may trigger him to get into his body, and then he may start engaging and initiating as well. At the end of the day, most men like to engage and initiate when they are ready, but they also need to understand that they need to do a better job of giving the woman proper time and energy for her to get ready as well, right? It can't always be like when the guy is ready to do it. So the man needs to also be physical and connective and present and listen, and whatever it is that he knows gets his woman into the mood. In terms of my personal experience, like, I enjoy it both. I definitely like initiating, because I think as a man, there's like this primalness to you, right? And I use the word hunting. It's not exactly metaphorically, like going out and like, okay, cool, like we're gonna have this experience, and you find it, and you can make it happen for you. And it's interesting analogy. So something I've realized about myself, and maybe this may be relevant for other men, but when we're pursuing a woman, right? Not necessarily sexually, but just like pursuing a woman or meeting a woman. When you are not using an app is kind of like, it's like presented in front of you, and you're like, here you go. You don't have to do much work, right? But when you're in like the wild, or like the real world, and you go and want to talk to a woman or whatever it is, it kind of gets this primal biological, like, that's how we're wired as men. You know what I mean? We're wired in that way, and it's very real. And so I generally prefer when I initiate and I engage, because it sparks that more primal kind of instinct within me, to find a partner or a connection or something like that. So I think that the world we live in now, where women they can be much more in their masculine energy at times, because they're working, etc., and so their energy may match a man's energy throughout the day, and they may be able to actually like connect in a way that's like pretty hot and intense, because it's you're both like seeking that same thing. So it's so I've given a lot of different answers, but it's so contextual, and it really depends on listening and paying attention to your partner and where they're at, and really seeing like, okay, cool, like, is this the right time to approach him right now? He seems really focused on something, and a woman knows when a man's really like focused and not present,
For sure.
and you got to let him do his thing, like let him be focused and present, and then he'll come out of it at some point, and then he's like, okay, like here we are, and then maybe at that point, it's better. But it can be tricky, and like lifestyles are tricky, and children and jobs and working from home and remote, it makes things it can make things more challenging.
Well, that's a great answer, because that is just a reminder for us all to kind of just tap in and be more aware and intuitive and just mindful. And, well, this has been so amazing, and I've really enjoyed our time, and I just appreciate everything that you shared. And with the last like minute, and it might not be a minute answer, but as my son's only 7, right? But I know that there's this world out there, and things will change so much by the time he's old enough to be checking out what's online and all of that. But do you have any like one little thing that we could start as parents, or anyone who's has, aunts, uncles, whatever, who's in contact with younger kids as they develop, that you would say like, hey, this would be great to integrate this or this conversation, or try and avoid this? Like, is there anything to help support this end goal of the overall consciousness and connection to self for men that we can instill and help guide them, to help them on that path? So it's not so much working backwards for a lot of men that, get to their 30s and 40s and they're having to kind of work backwards. Is there any like one little thing that you'd be like, hey, do this or don't do this, or integrate something?
Yeah. The most important thing is to keep children away from porn. If I had to give you like one answer, that's the answer.
Okay.
The second part of it is ensuring that your children have a very clear boundary with their own sexual energy at a young age, so that they start understanding and exploring their sexual energy. And, because kids are going to do what they're going to do. They're going to explore stuff. They're going to play with themselves. They're going to try to get into that. So I actually created like a digital sex ed program called Playbook.
Oh,
And
did you?
yeah. So it's available on my
It's like available.
yeah, it's available on my site, and you can buy it, and then there's different, sections within it. But it's about understanding what is a high value man? What does that look like? Having respect for yourself, like working on yourself. And then getting into like masturbation. Is it okay? Is it not okay? Understanding what porn does to your system and your brain. But all of that stuff, it really comes down to healthy relationship with your own sexual energy, right? And working with young men, especially on a lot of like the worth that's associated with their penis, right? Like as you're a kid and you're in high school and college and you're playing sports and you're in the locker room, and kids are they're pretty mean. They can be pretty nasty.
They are.
So
Kids can be assholes.
yeah, and I had a lot of problems when I was younger. I'm a grower. I'm not a shower. So like when I was younger, I was like, oh wow, like that's not really like my
Right.
my go-to, and you got kids in there who are hung in their showers, and so but no one knows what it looks like when it's hard.
Right.
So I think ensuring that kids feel comfortable with their own sexual energy, and making sure that like it's okay, and also like having conversations about it. And if it's not you and your kids, it's finding someone in the community or someone else who is giving education, or watching my content or whatever, other people in the space who are influencing kids in a more positive and healthy way. Because right now all they have is porn, and if children and their parents have a bit of like a weird, like, children don't necessarily listen to their parents all the time. So if the dad is giving the sex talk, maybe the child listens, maybe it doesn't. It's kind of hard. They're finding that other, like, in the community who can do that. And again, it's a tough thing because sex education is very bad. There really isn't any. So you got to like find books that may be relevant for those kids and things like that. But yeah, I would say the porn was the biggest one, because that if you can have a child not be addicted and watch porn at an early age, they're going to be so much more sexually healthy and literate as they get older. They're not going to have any of those bad habits. They're not going to have to work backwards, on their own like dopamine pathways, etc. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Yeah.
That's great. And that connects to what you said, the sexual energy. If they understand the importance of that, then those sort of things and activities aren't going to be so intriguing, at least. So, but, well, thank you so much. And
thank you so much. It was great. Yeah.
What is happening in Aspen today? Before we go, what's the weather like? What's going on?
Sunny. It's beautiful. I did a workout this morning. I'm going to go cold plunge this afternoon in the river right down the street. And I'm going to be working a bit on it today, but it's beautiful out here. I may do a hike. There's just such great nature out here, which is why
so cool.
Here. It's very grounding, very masculine, very grounding, like you feel very alive. So
I love that. Well, enjoy your day, and I look forward to connecting in the future.
I appreciate it, Marlo. Thank you so much.
Okay, just because this episode's over, it doesn't mean our time together has to be. Check the show notes on ways for us to stay connected. And one more thing, if you found this episode helpful, I would be so excited if you chose to rate it, review it, like it, share it, or shout it from the rooftops to those you think might align with it. The more soul-aligned we are, the more beautiful, harmonious, and fulfilling this world becomes. We're in this wild ride of life together. Okay, that's all. I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you've been listening to Wild Voice.